My family called me a failed soldier for years. At Thanksgiving, my uncle mocked me in front of everyone until the doorbell rang and my commander walked in, saluted, and said, "Major, we need you back at base." The room went silent. I'm Logan, 32, and if you asked my family, I'm the failed soldier. Their words, not mine. You'd think after 8 years of service, 2 deployments, and a chest full of commendations, they'd show me a little respect. But no. To them, I'm the guy who couldn't hack it because I left the military after my second tour. Apparently, choosing to come home and build a life as a civilian makes me a quitter. Thanksgiving has always been complicated for me. It's the one time of year we're all in one place. My parents, my sister and her husband, my younger brother, my uncle Mark, and a couple of cousins who think they're comedians. This year was no different. Mom had been texting me for weeks, reminding me that dinner was at 3 sharp and to please don't show up in your uniform. That last part was her polite way of saying, don't make a spectacle of yourself. I wasn't planning to. I hadn't worn my dress blues since the retirement ceremony, and frankly, they were boxed up in my closet. When I pulled up to my parents' house, I sat in the car for a full minute before getting out. It's not that I didn't want to see them. It's that I could already hear my uncle's voice in my head, cracking jokes about me washing out or losing my nerve. He's one of those guys who never served a day in his life, but thinks watching war documentaries gives him the right to weigh in on military careers. I walked in anyway, gift in hand, and was greeted with the usual chorus of, "Oh, look who finally showed up." The dining room was already buzzing with noise, football on in the background, smells of turkey and stuffing filling the air. I hugged Mom, nodded at Dad, and tried to blend in quietly, but Uncle Mark spotted me almost immediately. "There he is," he boomed, setting his beer down and pointing at me. "Back from early retirement, huh? What did they do? Kick you out for being too soft?" The room chuckled, just enough that it stung. I smiled, tight and polite, and took my seat at the far end of the table. Mom shot me a look, the kind that said, "Don't start anything," and I bit my tongue. I was used to it. This had been the family script since I left active duty. Anytime my military career came up, it became an open season for jokes. Dinner started, and for a while, I let the conversation wash over me. My sister talked about her new job, my brother bragged about a promotion, and I quietly filled my plate. Then, somewhere between the mashed potatoes and cranberry sauce, Mark leaned back in his chair, grinned, and said, "Hey Logan, you ever miss the action? Or are you too busy playing video games and collecting unemployment checks?" I froze mid-bite. There it was, the line that always came up in some form or another. Collecting unemployment checks. Never mind that I'd built a decent career for myself as a security consultant, working with companies to train their staff and secure their systems. Never mind that I probably made more now than I did in the military. In their minds, leaving meant failing. I set my fork down slowly and glanced around the table. My dad was smirking like it was harmless fun. My cousins were watching me, waiting for a reaction. Even my mom, who usually stayed neutral, just sighed and took a sip of wine. It hit me right then. This wasn't going to stop. Not tonight. Not ever, unless something changed. I forced a chuckle, but inside, I could feel my patience wearing thin. The Logan who used to laugh these things off was gone. I had spent years taking fire, both literal and figurative. I had learned when to keep my head down and when to push back. And as my uncle raised his glass and said, "To our civilian hero," with that mocking little twist on hero, I realized I was done staying quiet. What I didn't know was that this Thanksgiving was going to be different. There was a knock at the door, sharp, official, and perfectly timed. That made everyone look up. The knock at the door snapped everyone's heads toward the entryway. It wasn't the usual casual knock you get from a neighbor. It was sharp, deliberate, like someone with purpose. My dad frowned and pushed his chair back. "Probably a delivery," he muttered, heading toward the door. I watched him through the doorway from my seat. But before he got there, Uncle Mark smirked and said, "Logan, that for you? What is it? The unemployment office finally came to repossess your couch." A few people chuckled. My sister rolled her eyes and said, "Mark," but there was no real bite to it. No one was going to stop him. Dad opened the door. A gust of cold November air swept in, and then, before I could make out who was standing there, Dad's tone changed. It wasn't his usual gruff voice. It was polite, almost nervous. Come in," he said. Two figures stepped inside. One was a man in a pressed uniform. I recognized the insignia immediately, and my stomach tightened. The other was a civilian woman holding a sealed folder. The entire room went quiet. You could have heard the creak of the dining chairs as everyone turned to stare. "Logan," the man said, nodding toward me with a small smile. "Didn't expect to find you here. We tried your phone, but it went to voicemail. We were told we might find you with family today." I stood up slowly, my heart hammering. Every pair of eyes was on me now, and for the first time all night, no one was laughing. But before anything else could be said, my uncle broke the silence. "What's this? Did he get drafted back?" "Oh no," he said with exaggerated sarcasm. "Don't take him. He's so busy sitting around." I ignored him. I walked over to shake the man's hand. The woman with the folder handed it to me, and I felt the weight of it. Thick, official, serious. "I'll look over this later," I said quietly. "No rush," the man replied. "But we do need your answer by Monday. Consider it a high priority." Then, just like that, they left. The door shut, and the house seemed to hold its breath. "What was that about?" my brother asked, breaking the silence. "Nothing that concerns you," I said, setting the folder down on the side table. That should have been the end of it, but of course, it wasn't. Uncle Mark chuckled. "Oh, come on. Don't keep us in suspense. What did they want? You to peel potatoes? Guard the parking lot?" My dad smirked. "Probably some ceremonial thing. They have those, right? Like when they let old-timers march around in parades." "Yeah," my cousin chimed in. "Like those guys at football games who dress up in uniform and fire the little cannon." They laughed again, a low, mean kind of laughter that stuck under my skin like a splinter. I sat back down, trying to keep my expression neutral, but my mind was racing. I could feel that familiar tightness in my chest, the one I used to get before going on patrol. It was anger, yes, but also that dangerous kind of clarity. The rest of dinner went on like nothing happened, but the tone had shifted. Every little thing seemed designed to get under my skin. When I tried to talk about my work, a project I'd just wrapped up securing a logistics company's system, my dad waved a hand and said, "That's not real work, Logan. You just sit at a computer. Your brother does real work. He's out there closing deals, bringing in money." My brother grinned, soaking in the praise. "Hey, someone's got to keep the family name respectable," he said. I noticed Mom didn't say a word through all this. She just kept sipping her wine, glancing between me and Dad like she was waiting for me to explode. At one point, my sister passed me the gravy boat, but accidentally tipped it just enough that it spilled onto my plate, drenching my turkey. She snickered, murmuring, "Oops," and went back to talking to her husband like nothing happened. I dabbed at the mess with a napkin, not saying a word, but my jaw was clenched so tight it hurt. The conversation kept circling back to me. "Do you even have a girlfriend now?" one cousin asked with faux innocence. "Maybe he's too busy playing soldier," another quipped. It wasn't just jokes. It was the way they looked at me, like I was some washed-up has-been, like my years overseas were just some embarrassing phase they had to tolerate. At one point, my uncle leaned over and stage-whispered loud enough for the table to hear, "You know, Logan, there's no shame in failing." Well, okay, there's some shame. The table erupted in laughter. That was the moment I stopped trying to fit in. I sat back, folded my arms, and just watched them. Every laugh, every jab, every little look they shared. I took it all in. It was almost funny, in a dark way. They thought they were tearing me down, but all they were really doing was reminding me why I'd built a life outside of this house. By the time dessert came out, I had gone quiet, completely quiet, and that seemed to make them even bolder. "Come on, Logan," my dad said, chuckling, "don't sulk. We're just teasing. You used to be able to take a joke." "Yeah," my uncle added, "back when he had a spine." My sister laughed so hard she nearly dropped her pie fork. I looked around the table one last time, and that's when it hit me. They weren't just teasing. They meant every word. To them, this was the truth. I was the disappointment, the punchline. And for the first time in years, I felt something sharp and electric cut through the numbness. Let them laugh now, I thought. Let them. Because I had a folder sitting on the side table, and what was inside it was going to change everything. After dessert, there was a brief lull. That quiet moment when everyone leans back, plates empty, wine glasses half drained, and the conversation drifts into a more casual hum. For a minute, I almost let myself believe the worst was over. My uncle was half asleep in his chair, My cousins were scrolling through their phones, and even my dad had gone quiet, staring at the football game on TV. I let out a slow breath and thought maybe I could just slip out soon, make some excuse about needing to get home early. But peace never lasts long in this house. It started with a clink of glass, my dad tapping his fork against his wine goblet. "All right, everyone," he said, clearing his throat. "Before we wrap up for the night, there's something I want to say." The chatter died down. Everyone turned toward him, expectant. He stood, a little unsteady from the drinks, and looked around the room like a king addressing his court. "As you all know, this family's been through a lot this past year. But we've also been blessed. Your brother's business has been doing better than ever. Your sister's finally expecting, and we've got a lot to be proud of." He paused dramatically, then smiled. "And that's why we've decided that it's time to secure this family's future, officially." I frowned. "Secure it how?" Before Dad could answer, Mom stood up next to him, holding a folder that looked suspiciously like the one I'd set aside earlier. My stomach sank. "This house, and the land around it, has been in our family for 3 generations," Mom said. "Your father and I have decided to put it into a trust, with your brother as the trustee." I blinked. "Wait, what?" "It just makes sense," Dad said. "He's the one who's here, the one who helps out with everything. You're never around, Logan. You live way across town. And well, you've got your own life now. This is for the people who are here day to day." For a moment, I thought I'd misheard him. This was the house I grew up in, the land I used to mow every summer, the place I sent money home for when I was overseas because Dad said they couldn't keep up with the mortgage. "You put it in his name?" I asked slowly. "Not exactly," Mom said quickly, like that would soften the blow. "He just has control over the trust. We thought it was only fair. He's going to start a family here, after all. We need someone responsible managing it." I felt like the air had been punched out of me. "Responsible? I sent you thousands of dollars to save this place. And you didn't even tell me you were doing this." Dad waved a hand dismissively. "Don't make this about money, Logan. This is about keeping the family property where it belongs. You have your apartment, your job. You don't need this land." I stared at him, waiting for someone, anyone, to jump in, to say this was too much. But all I saw were nods around the table. My sister actually smiled, resting a hand on her belly like she was already picturing her future child playing in the yard. And then my brother grinned. "Don't worry, Logan. I'll let you visit," he said, "as long as you give me a heads up first." The table erupted in laughter. I just stood there, frozen. It wasn't just the decision. It was the way they did it. Here, in front of everyone, like it was some kind of performance. Like they wanted to watch me squirm. My uncle raised his glass and said, "To the rightful heir." And everyone clinked glasses, even Mom, who looked at me over the rim of her wine like she was daring me to say something. My hands were trembling. I wanted to yell, to slam my fists on the table, to demand they undo what they'd done. But no sound came out. Instead, I felt this strange, icy calm wash over me. "You did this behind my back?" I said quietly. Dad shrugged. "We didn't think you'd mind. It's not like you were ever going to settle down here. You don't even come home for half the holidays. We had to do what's best for everyone." Best for everyone. Those words echoed in my head like a gunshot. I looked at my brother, still grinning like he'd just won a prize, and that's when it clicked. This was never about responsibility or family. This was about control, about keeping me on the outside. I felt my face go hot, but I forced myself to stay still. "Logan," Mom said gently, as if she hadn't just gutted me in front of everyone, "don't make this ugly. Just be happy for your brother. You can still come visit. It's not like we're cutting you off." That got another round of chuckles. My uncle leaned over and said, "Guess you're officially the black sheep now." That broke the last thread of restraint I was holding on to. I stood up slowly, my chair scraping back across the floor. The sound was loud in the suddenly quiet room. For a moment, no one moved. "What are you doing?" Dad asked, his tone cautious now. I didn't answer. I walked to the side table, picked up the folder that had been handed to me earlier, and tucked it under my arm. Then I turned back toward the table. "I hope you all had your fun tonight," I said, my voice low but steady. "Because things are about to change." No one said a word. I could see the flicker of uncertainty in my dad's eyes, the way my mom's smile faltered just slightly. But my brother just smirked. "What? Are you going to go cry about it? Come on, Logan. Don't be so dramatic." And that was it, the final twist of the knife. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just nodded once, turned on my heel, and walked out the front door. The cold air hit me like a wall, but I welcomed it. Behind me, I could still hear their voices starting up again, low, amused, smug, as if I'd just confirmed everything they thought about me. Let them laugh, I thought, as I got into my car. Let them. Because the folder in my hand wasn't just some ceremonial invitation. It was something they didn't know I had. And by the time they found out what it meant, they wouldn't be laughing anymore. The drive back to my apartment was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels heavy, like even the car didn't want to make noise. The streets were nearly empty, just the occasional pair of headlights cutting through the cold night air. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles ached, but I didn't even notice until I pulled into my parking spot and my hands wouldn't unclench. When I got inside, I didn't turn on the lights. I just tossed my coat on the chair, dropped the folder on the counter, and sat on the couch in the dark. The house smelled like leftover coffee from the morning, faint and bitter. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a message from my sister. "You didn't have to be so dramatic tonight. We were just trying to do what's right for the family." I stared at the screen until it went dark again, then set it face down on the table. I don't know how long I sat there. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional car passing outside. Eventually, I got up and walked into my bedroom, opened the drawer where I kept an old shoebox, and sat on the floor with it. Inside were photos from my deployments. Some were creased from being shoved in rucksacks, others carefully kept in plastic sleeves. There was one of me and my squad in Afghanistan, all of us grinning like idiots despite the dust and heat. Another of me standing next to a Humvee, holding a little cardboard sign that said "Miss you, Mom," that I posed with for her birthday one year. I set that one aside. There was a time when I thought I was making them proud. When every letter I sent home, every paycheck I sent back to cover the bills, was proof that I was doing right by my family. Now all I could think about was Dad's face when he said "best for everyone." I leaned back against the bed and let the weight of it settle on me. I had done everything right, by their standards, anyway. I'd kept my head down, worked hard, stayed out of trouble. I'd stood up when they needed me and kept my mouth shut when they didn't. And somehow, none of it mattered. A bitter laugh escaped before I could stop it. I stayed up late that night, staring at the ceiling, playing every conversation back in my head. My brother's smirk. My uncle's toast. The way Mom had looked me in the eye while siding with them. At some point, I must have dozed off because I woke up around 3 a.m. with my phone buzzing again. This time, a group chat notification. It was my cousins, posting memes about family inheritance drama. One of them sent a gif of a guy being pushed out of a house and captioned it, "Logan showing up next Christmas." They were laughing about it. I shut my phone off completely and lay there staring into the dark, my chest tight. The next morning was worse. My phone lit up with more messages, this time from Mom. "You should come by later to talk this through calmly. We don't want you feeling left out." Feeling left out. As if this was about my feelings instead of what they'd taken from me. I didn't reply. Instead, I grabbed my coat and went for a walk. The air was biting cold, and every breath stung my lungs, but it helped clear my head. I walked past the park where Dad used to take us to throw a football around, past the diner where we'd celebrate birthdays when money was tight. Each memory hit like a jab, but I didn't stop. Somewhere between the park and my apartment, the anger started to settle into something else, something quieter, sharper. I didn't cry. Not then. But that night, sitting alone with a cup of coffee gone cold, I finally let it hit me. I cried for the kid who sent his paychecks home from the desert thinking it would keep the family afloat. For the young man who believed he'd come home to open arms, not a stack of backhanded jokes. For the version of myself that thought if I just kept giving, they'd finally see me as enough. When I was done, I felt hollow, but not broken. Not yet. I picked up the folder again and flipped it open. Inside was everything. The orders, the recommendation letter, the briefing about the new security initiative I'd been asked to lead. It wasn't ceremonial. It was real, and it was big. I traced the official seal on the first page with my thumb and felt something stir in me that had been quiet for a long time. They thought I was finished. They thought they could humiliate me, cut me out, and I'd just fade quietly into the background. But as I sat there in the quiet, I realized something. They didn't know me at all. Not anymore. I closed the folder carefully and set it back on the table. Tomorrow, I decided, I'd make some calls. I'd start putting pieces in motion, quietly, carefully. I wasn't going to lash out. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing me angry. No, when I moved, it would be deliberate. And when it happened, they wouldn't just feel guilty. They'd remember it for the rest of their lives. The morning after my late-night breakdown felt different. Not lighter, exactly, but clearer. The fog that had been sitting in my head since Thanksgiving was gone. I brewed coffee, showered, and sat down at my desk with the folder open and a notepad in front of me. For the first time in a long time, I felt that sense of purpose I'd had back when I was still in uniform. The feeling of knowing there was a mission ahead, something bigger than myself to work toward. The first step was simple. I made the call. By noon, I was on a video call with my old commander, the same man who had shown up at the door on Thanksgiving. "You sure about this?" he asked after I told him I was in. "I'm sure," I said, my voice steady. He nodded. "All right, then let's get to work." The weeks that followed were brutal, but in the best way possible. Early mornings, late nights, training sessions that pushed me back into shape, strategy briefings that reminded me just how sharp my mind could be when I was focused. I found myself waking up earlier and earlier, hitting the gym before dawn, running drills with a small team I'd been assigned to lead. My body ached constantly, but it was a good ache, the kind that told me I was getting stronger. Outside of training, I started reworking my civilian life too. I finally upgraded my cramped apartment, trading the one-bedroom I'd been in for a place with space, a real home, with a balcony and enough room for a proper office. I bought furniture that wasn't secondhand, cooked real meals again. Little by little, my life started to look less like something I was surviving and more like something I was building. On weekends, I reconnected with a couple of old friends from my unit. We'd grab beers, swap stories, laugh about the dumb things we did overseas. One of them, Jordan, became a regular presence in my life again. He was the kind of guy who didn't let you wallow, who'd show up at your door at 6 a.m. with running shoes and say, "Let's go." Those runs hurt like hell at first, but with every mile, I felt the weight of Thanksgiving night get a little lighter. I also started making moves with my career. The security consulting work I'd been doing had been steady, but now I began taking on bigger contracts, government level, high-paying, the kind that put my name in front of the right people. Money stopped being a source of stress. My savings grew. My investments, the ones I'd been ignoring, started getting attention again. I wasn't flaunting anything, but I could feel it. The version of me who used to feel small at that dining table was gone. There were moments, quiet ones, where I'd catch myself smiling for no reason. Like the first time I saw the city skyline from my new apartment's balcony at night, lights glittering like they were cheering me on. Or the day I got an email confirming I'd been selected for a specialized training program only a handful of candidates had been invited to. It wasn't just about proving them wrong anymore. It was about proving myself right. Of course, I hadn't forgotten what happened. I still had the text messages saved, the group chat screenshots backed up. That folder was still on my desk, now joined by a few others as I gathered more documents, contracts, letters. But the anger that used to keep me awake at night wasn't controlling me anymore. It was guiding me. I kept my family at arm's length during this time. I'd get the occasional message, mostly from Mom, asking when I'd come by, or if I was still upset. "We didn't mean to hurt you," one of her texts said. "You have to understand, we did what we thought was best." I didn't reply. It wasn't silence out of spite. It was silence because I wasn't ready yet. Every day, I felt myself growing stronger, steadier. I wasn't just coming back from what happened. I was preparing. By spring, I had changed so much that even I barely recognized myself. My shoulders were broader, my posture straighter, my voice more confident when I spoke. Jordan noticed it too. One night, as we were sitting on the balcony with a couple of beers, he said, "You look different, like you finally shook something off." I took a sip and smiled. "Yeah," I said, "I think I did." But in the back of my mind, I knew there was one thing left, one weight still hanging there. Thanksgiving had taken something from me, and one day soon, I was going to take something back. By early summer, the transformation was complete, at least on the outside. I had a routine, a purpose, and a circle of people who actually respected me. The only thing left was the part of me that still felt tethered to that dining room table. That tether snapped the day I got a call from an old friend, not Jordan this time, but someone I hadn't spoken to since my second deployment. His name was Captain Miles, a quiet, sharp guy who'd always had a knack for noticing things other people missed. "Logan," he said after the usual pleasantries, "I'm not sure if you've heard, but the property your folks live on? It's still partially under your name. I blinked. What are you talking about? They put it in a trust. Yeah, he said, but the deed hasn't been fully transferred. It's still got you listed as an executor from when you helped refinance it during your second tour. If the trust wasn't filed correctly, and from what I'm seeing, it wasn't, you've still got legal say. I sat there in stunned silence as he went on. Look, I know it's none of my business, but you might want to pull the county records. Just see for yourself. The paperwork's sloppy. After we hung up, I wasted no time. I pulled up the property records online, hands steady but heart pounding. And there it was, just like he said, my name still listed. Not just as an executor, as a partial co-owner. All that money I'd sent home back then, it wasn't a gift. It had legally tied me to the property. And they either didn't know, or they thought I'd never bother to check. I sat back in my chair and let out a slow, controlled breath. This was it. This was the leverage I hadn't even known I had. I made some calls, first to a lawyer I trusted, then to a friend who worked at the courthouse. Each conversation confirmed what I already suspected. My parents and brother had overstepped. The trust they set up didn't erase my share of the ownership, and any decision about the property technically required my signature. For the first time since Thanksgiving, I laughed. Not bitterly, not angrily. It was a quiet, surprised laugh, the kind that comes when the universe hands you exactly what you need at exactly the right time. From that day on, I started playing a long game. I didn't storm over there or call them screaming. Instead, I sent Mom a message. Hey, been a while. How's everyone doing? She replied within minutes. Logan, it's so good to hear from you. Everyone's been asking about you. You should come by for dinner soon. I agreed, and that was step one. When I showed up a few nights later, the house was full of the same familiar noise and chaos. My brother was there, still smug, my uncle cracking jokes as usual. But this time, I didn't flinch. Logan, Dad said, sounding almost surprised. Good to see you. You look different. Better, my sister added, her tone grudging. I smiled, calm and polite. Thanks. Been working hard. Dinner went as it usually did. Except this time, I stayed quiet for a different reason. Not because I was biting my tongue, but because I was watching. I asked questions about their plans for the property, their schedules, their big summer barbecue. I nodded and smiled at everything they said, even when my uncle made another dig about me, finally growing up. Inside, my mind was working like clockwork. I learned that they were planning a big renovation in the fall, tearing down the old barn, adding a guest house, refinancing the mortgage under my brother's name. All things they couldn't legally do without me. When dessert was served, I leaned back and said casually, You know, it's funny. I was looking at the county records the other day. The table went still for a second. Oh, Dad asked, cautious. Yeah, I didn't realize I was still on the deed. Guess I forgot about all those documents I signed back when I sent the money home. My brother stiffened just slightly, a blink and you'll miss it reaction, but I didn't miss it. Well, Mom said quickly, that's just a technicality. You don't need to worry about that. Oh, I'm not worried, I said lightly. Just interesting, that's all. I let the silence hang for a beat too long before smiling and changing the subject. They didn't know what to make of it, and that was exactly what I wanted. In the weeks that followed, I started tying up loose ends. I met with my lawyer again, drafted some papers, and filed a few notices with the county office. Quietly, methodically, Jordan noticed the shift in me. You're up to something, he said one night as we worked out. Just getting my house in order, I said. He smirked. Literally, I didn't answer, but I smiled. Every step I took made me feel steadier, more in control. By late summer, I had everything ready, legally, financially, emotionally. The next time I saw my family, it wouldn't just be as Logan, the failed soldier. It would be as someone who held all the cards. And when I finally played them, it wouldn't be loud. It would be calm, surgical, and they would never see it coming. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. One late August afternoon, Mom called me with what sounded like rehearsed cheerfulness. Logan, we're having everyone over this Sunday for a little celebration. Your brother's finally getting the financing approved for the guest house. You should come. I almost laughed out loud. Perfect. I'll be there, I said simply. When Sunday rolled around, I didn't just show up, I arrived early. Not in uniform, not trying to make a statement, just in a crisp shirt and jacket. Calm, collected. The house was buzzing when I walked in. Contractors' blueprints were spread across the dining table. My brother stood at the center like a project manager, talking about square footage and costs. When he saw me, his grin faltered for a second. "You made it," he said. "Of course," I replied, smiling just enough to keep them guessing. "Wouldn't miss it." We went through the usual small talk until everyone had gathered, plates in hand, laughter echoing through the house. Dad finally raised his glass. "To new beginnings," he said proudly, clinking glasses with my brother. I waited until everyone had taken a sip, then placed my glass gently on the table. "Before you go signing anything official," I said casually, "I think we should talk about the deed." Silence fell. My brother's jaw tightened. Mom gave me a warning look, the same one she used to give me as a kid before I was about to cross a line. "What about it?" Dad asked cautiously. I reached into my jacket and pulled out a folder, not the same one from Thanksgiving, but a newer, thicker one. I placed it on the table and slid it toward him. "Everything you've planned, the guest house, the refinancing, the renovations, you can't do any of it without my signature. Legally." Dad blinked. "That's not." "It is," I said gently, cutting him off. "I had it all reviewed. The trust was filed incorrectly. My share is still binding, which means nothing can happen on this property unless I agree." My brother let out a short, disbelieving laugh. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" I tilted my head slightly. "Check the county records. Or just flip to page 3. He snatched the folder, flipped through it, and I watched his face pale as he reached the notarized documents. Mom tried to recover. "Logan, this isn't necessary. We can work this out as a family." "I agree," I said, "which is why I came early today, to give you a choice." I stood, slow and deliberate, letting the quiet stretch just long enough for them to feel it. "You have two options. Either we redraw the trust to include me as co-trustee, with equal say, or I file for full partition of the property, which, as my lawyer tells me, would force a sale of the house and land at market value." Gasps around the table. My uncle actually sat forward, his smirk gone for once. "You wouldn't dare," my brother said through gritted teeth. I looked him dead in the eye. "Try me." No one moved. I could see it happening in real time, the realization washing over them that the power dynamic had just flipped completely. Mom opened her mouth, closed it, then turned to Dad like she was waiting for him to fix this. But Dad just sat there, jaw working, silent. Finally, my brother shoved the folder back across the table. "Fine. Co-trustee." I picked it up, tucked it neatly back into my jacket, and smiled. "Good choice." The tension in the room was so thick you could feel it, but I didn't rub it in. I didn't gloat. I just finished my drink, thanked Mom for dinner, and left, calm, measured, leaving them to sit in the mess they'd made. But that wasn't the end of it. A week later, I hosted a barbecue at my new place, a smaller gathering, just a few friends, some people from work, and Jordan. I posted a single photo online, me on my balcony, city skyline in the background, smiling with a beer in hand. The caption was simple: "Sometimes you don't have to raise your voice to be heard." Within hours, my sister sent me a text, "Message received." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The best revenge wasn't slamming the table or screaming until my throat was raw. It was watching them realize that I wasn't just the failed soldier anymore. I was someone they couldn't control. And from now on, every decision about that house, the same house they tried to use to humiliate me, would require my permission. They'd never sit at that table and laugh at me again. The weeks after that Sunday meeting were quieter than I'd expected. For the first time in years, my phone wasn't buzzing with group chats, sarcastic memes, or family updates. The silence was almost eerie. But eventually, it started. The first to crack was Mom. She showed up at my apartment one afternoon, holding a plate of her homemade cookies like a peace offering. "You know," she said as I let her in, "your father hasn't slept well since that dinner." I raised an eyebrow. "I'm sure he hasn't." She set the cookies on the counter, twisting her hands together. "Logan, you have to understand. We weren't trying to hurt you. We just thought we were doing the right thing. For the family. The right thing doesn't usually involve cutting someone out of their own home without telling them," I said evenly. She flinched but didn't argue. "You've changed," she said after a long pause. "You carry yourself differently now. Your father sees it too." "Good," I said simply. For a second, she looked like she might say more, maybe apologize, maybe explain, but she just sighed, patted my arm, and left. Dad didn't reach out for another 2 weeks. When he finally did, it was in the form of a short, curt call. You didn't have to embarrass us like that, he said. No greeting, no small talk. I didn't embarrass you, I replied. You embarrassed yourselves when you decided to play judge and jury without me. All I did was show you the rule book. He was quiet for a moment before muttering, You're colder than I remember. No, I said. I'm just done playing along. He hung up after that. My brother took the longest to come around. At first, he tried to steamroll me, texting about renovation schedules, permits, contractors, as if nothing had changed. Each time, I replied with the same line, Send it over. I'll review and sign if it makes sense. After the fourth or fifth delay, he snapped, You're just doing this to make my life difficult. I didn't reply immediately. I waited a full day, then sent back, No, I'm doing this to make sure no one ever tries to erase me from my own family again. He didn't text back after that. But the real shift happened at the next family gathering I agreed to attend, a small one, just a Sunday dinner, nothing fancy. When I walked in, there was no sarcastic comment from Uncle Mark. No failed soldier jokes, no digs about my career. They greeted me politely, almost cautiously, like someone who just realized the person they used to mock might actually be holding the keys to their future. During dinner, I noticed something new, silence. Not the tense, icy kind, but the kind that comes when people are actually thinking about what they say before they say it. At one point, my brother tried to make a joke about me being the co-landlord now, but it fell flat. No one laughed. Not even him. Afterward, as we were clearing dishes, my sister pulled me aside. You know, she said softly, I didn't think you'd actually go through with it. I thought you'd back down. I looked at her and smiled, just a little. That's the problem. You all thought I'd back down forever. She nodded slowly, like she finally understood. When I left that night, I didn't feel angry anymore. I felt steady. The house looked different to me now. Not because anything had changed physically, the siding was the same, the trees still swayed in the yard, but because I knew I wasn't just a visitor anymore. I had a say, and they knew it too. As I walked to my car, I glanced back once more. Through the window, I saw them all sitting in the living room, quiet, thoughtful. For the first time in years, they weren't laughing at me. They were listening. I opened the car door, got in, and started the engine. And as I pulled away, I couldn't help but smile. The kind of smile you give when you know you've won without ever raising your voice. Because in the end, I didn't just take back my place at the table. I built one they could never pull out from under me again. And this time, I'm the one who decides who gets a seat.